Hello, so doing a review of The Graveyard here, which is loosely the third film in the Bloody Murder series, in the sense that it is set in the same place of Camp Placid Pines, and it kind of has a similar game to the Bloody Murder game that you would have seen in the previous two films. In that this one's called Run for Your Life, I believe, as opposed to Bloody Murder, but it's a very similar premise. Those are kind of where the similarities end, though, as this does not feature the killer from the previous two films, Trevor Morehouse, so it is kind of a standalone film, but it is kind of loosely linked to those two, so I just thought I'd make that clear at the start. Okay, the basic storyline for this one is that you've got a group of kids that kind of break into a graveyard one night, just for an evening of fun and frolics, I guess. And this involves a prank being played on one of the characters during the aforementioned game of Run for Your Life, which results in one of the kids dressing up as a masked killer and chasing the victim of the prank. But it gets out of hand, kind of, and the person that is running away forgets to look where he's going and kind of manages to somehow impale himself on an exposed railing, and thus dies. So this causes obviously a big scene, and the kid that was actually dressed as the killer and was chasing him ends up carrying the can for the whole thing and kind of goes to prison for 5 years. I think it's 5 years. It could be less than that, but it's certainly a decent amount of time. And the film picks back up several years later upon his release, and he's paroled, and straight away, immediately following his release, he goes back to the Camp Placid Pines graveyard area where the death took place some years previous, and all of his friends that were involved in that incident years back meet up there as well to try and help him get over his demons, kind of set his ghost to rest, find closure, that kind of thing. So they're all kind of meeting up at this aforementioned graveyard, Camp Placid Pines area. And whilst they're there, it doesn't take long for things to take a bit of a sinister turn. As you can imagine, people start turning up dead, people start going missing, and so on and so forth. The character of Bobby, who was the one that was blamed for the murder and the one that was paroled, he kind of goes off on a hike to try and get help because their cars have been destroyed as well, so they can't drive out of the area. So he kind of hikes off to try and get help. But unfortunately, he runs foul of the local sheriff, who mistakenly arrests him, thinking that he's responsible for something that he wasn't actually responsible for. So there's a bit of a misunderstanding there, and he ends up getting arrested, and that thus leaves the rest of our characters back at the camp, kind of isolated at the mercy of the killer, really. So that's the basic premise of it. Okay, so we're going to move into the good points now, and it has a nice traditional slasher feel to it. All the trappings are there, all the ingredients. Yeah, it's a bit cliche, but it's got all the things that we like as slasher fans. The accident years before is the killer someone looking for revenge from what happened all those years previous. It's got a bit of nudity scattered in there, some brutal kills here and there. Some of the kills aren't that good, but there's one or two really good ones. You've got a masked killer. I always personally prefer it when the killer wears a mask. That's just my preference, though. Kids isolated in the woods. Yeah, it's a bit of a rip-off of Friday the 13th, but that Bloody Murder series did that as well. But all the trappings are there, all the ingredients that you would probably look for if you are indeed a slasher fan, as I'm guessing you are if you're watching this video. So in that sense, you're in very comfortable surroundings, so it's good in that regard, if a little bit cliche, like I said. Okay, I was a bit worried that it might be quite a low budget film, being like straight to DVD, because the first Bloody Murder was really low budget, and it really showed especially for the kills. But in this case, I'm pleased to report that it's more in line with the second film, so it's quite well directed, quite well shot, and there's some decent gore effects. It's certainly not bad when it comes to the gore and such. So you don't need to worry if you've seen the first film and you're worried it's going to be similar to that. I definitely say it's closer to the second film in terms of the production value, so that's a good thing. Okay. As I said, the killer has a mask, and it's quite a decent mask. It looks quite scary at times, and he's up to a point, he's fairly menacing. There's a couple of parts in particular that stand out. There's a shower scene where he's really quite scary, and there's a part when he's taunting one of the characters just before he starts to chase her with something. I think the character might be called Alice, I'm not completely sure about that. And he taunts her with something just prior to the chase scene, and that's pretty well done as well. So yeah, he's not the scariest looking killer, but he's certainly not bad, so yeah, they've done a decent job there. There's also a nice Halloween reference in here when they stumble across the empty burial plot of Eric, who was the one that was killed in the initial sequence, sort of years before, and they go to his grave and find that it's been kind of desecrated and the body stolen, which is kind of a nod to Halloween, if you remember that scene with the gravestone missing. Okay, now on to the bad points, and unfortunately there's more bad points than good points with this one. And the first thing to mention is that not actually much of it takes place in the graveyard, so if you don't really know much about this film and you're just picking it up from the picture and from the title of the graveyard, you might be disappointed, because only really the last part of the film and the first part take place in the actual graveyard. The rest of it is more kind of in the Camp Placid Pines, so something to bear in mind there. There's a few little things in it that don't really make sense. There's actually quite a few things, but on their own they're not that much of a problem, but when you kind of add them all up together, it doesn't really sit well with me. So there's one thing that is quite noticeable at the start, or near the start, once we go, not in the kind of 5 years previous sequence, but once we get to the present day and we're kind of in the Camp Placid Pines meeting our main characters once again, there is a man, seemingly like this random man that he's killed. He's tied to a chair and like killed by the murderer, and basically we don't really know who he is. It's never explained whether it's just some sort of random camper that the killer wanted to get out of the way before the main sort of games for him started, or it's not really very clear, so it's very strange. And at the end there are a couple of possibilities that are thrown up by the ending that I don't want to obviously spoil the ending for you, but there's a couple of things that maybe you could say, oh, it's this guy then, from what we've since learned at the end, but even then, if you're going back and looking at it, the time frame would be all kind of messed up, so it wouldn't even make sense for it to be a couple of things that you could possibly say the ending explains. So even in light of the ending, it doesn't really make sense who this guy is, so that's a bit random. So if it was just some random camper, they could have done a better job of explaining that. So it's quite confusing, and I was really confused when I first saw it and didn't know who the hell he was. There's one other part where one of the characters, Sarah, sees something on her friend's computer, her friend being a male character called Charlie, and apparently it's some like disturbing images of herself that he's collected over the years, but we don't actually see through her eyes at this point, so we don't actually see anything that she's seen that is untoward. And later on she says that she saw these disturbing images on the computer, and we're like, what? We didn't see these images? What's she on about? We do later see them, but it would have made more sense for me to have actually seen at the time through her eyes. So we initially knew what she was talking about when she made this comment about the disturbing images. Was at that point I didn't know what she was talking about, so it was a little bit confusing. Only a small thing, but just worth picking out. Other than that, Sarah has an ex-girlfriend called Zoe who randomly shows up about halfway through the film, which is a bit out of the blue, out of left field. She basically just turns up to add an extra body to the body count, essentially. But one of the characters makes reference to her leaving on a motorbike, but at this point we've not seen any kind of bike, so we don't know that she's a biker chick or anything like that. So it seems a bit random for him to make that comment when we hadn't even seen a bike, so I was a bit confused again with that. Later on we do actually see the bike, but at the point when the comment is made about her leaving on a bike, we haven't seen it, so again, it doesn't really make much sense. Also, there's quite a weird chase scene with Alice and the killer. I guess you could explain it just with the killer just playing with her like a cat with a mouse, just trying to let her think that she's getting away, and then closing the net just as she thinks she's going to escape. But it's a bit weirdly shot, and it's a bit out of place really, and you'll see what I mean if you watch the film. It just doesn't. Yeah, it's a bit funny. You could explain it like I said, with it just being the killer messing with her head, but not very well done really. And one final thing is that there's the characters of Bobby and Jack actually make a second attempt at doing a similar prank to what I did in the years previous, which is kind of really poor taste in light of what's just happened with well, not just happened, but what happened 5 years previous with the death of Eric. It seems in very poor taste that they would now do a similar prank. And it's quite out of character for Bobby at this point, because since being released from prison, he's been quite a somber, serious character, and for him to suddenly play this prank with Jack, it seems just really weird, really, and just a bit strange, a bit odd. And it really kind of goes against what we've seen from his character up to that point since being released. Okay then, but the main problem, this is the big problem now, the thing that really lowered the film for me, is that the ending doesn't make sense whatsoever. It doesn't make a jot of sense. I can't explain too much without giving away spoilers, but basically you've got two male characters, one of them Bobby, who are fighting, and you've got your final girl, Michelle, also present for this. And as Bobby and this male character start fighting, she runs off, leaving Bobby and the male character to fight. And Bobby, we don't actually see it happen, but Bobby gets impaled on some railings, similar to what happened to Eric years before, and is then seemingly left for dead by this male character, who then goes off in search of the final girl. he catches up with her and he starts menacing her, but then just as he's about to seemingly kill her, Bobby makes a strange return, seemingly unhurt from the impaling that we just saw moments before. Doesn't make any sense. How he's not hurt, I don't know, but he's showing no ill effects from the impaling that supposedly left him at death's door just moments earlier. And then he, after a bit of a struggle, he shoots this other guy in the head, supposedly. I think it was in the head. It could have been in the chest or something, but I think it's supposed to be in the head. You think, okay, that's the end of it. But then shortly after, this other guy comes back and he's seemingly unhurt, even though he was just shot in the head. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, one possible thing was that I thought perhaps they were trying to hint that the two male characters were in cahoots, and they were like trying to hoodwink the final girl. I think her name was Michelle, and they like staged the whole fight, and the impaling was just all pretend, just to fool her. But that wouldn't make sense because she actually ran off as they were fighting, so she wouldn't even have seen the impaling. So if it was all for her benefit, she wasn't even there to see it. So even if you're trying to explain it that way, it wouldn't make sense. So it was all a big mess, really, and the whole ending just didn't add up. It was just all a big mess. Like I said, it just brought the whole film down. So overall, then, going to my final verdict now. And I did quite enjoy the film in places. There were, like I said it before, it had all the ingredients that you expect from a slasher film. So it did have some good points, and there were parts that I did like, such as the shower scene death was really good. One or two other decent little things, but on the whole, there were just ultimately too many small problems, and I've gone through some of them here. But you can overlook these things if they're just isolated incidents, but add them all up together, and then couple that with the awful ending, which didn't make any sense. It really lowered the whole tone for me. So in the end, I had to give it a 2 out of 5. I was going to go for a 3, but the ending really brought it down for me to a 2. So yeah, I'll just show you the back, by the way, in case you're interested. Looks like that. Not that we're talking about the DVD so much here, as opposed to the film itself. Not really reviewing the DVD, but there are no extras, by the way. If you're interested, there are no special features with this, not even a trailer. I think it might have subtitles, I'm not sure. I can't recall if it even had subtitles. But yeah, on the whole though, as I say, a bit disappointing. And I'm going to give it out of 5 then. Like I said before, just the 2 stars. So there you go, 2 out of 5. Okay, thanks for watching and goodbye.